But you can see Hanukkah, and Hanukkah can be spelled in so many different ways. And you can see there at the bottom, they got Chanukah and some of the other expressions. So Hanukkah is not like a bad word that some Israelites act like. The word Hanat means to dedicate, right? Hanukkah is dedication, right? So that's why we call it the Feast of Dedication. But it's okay to call it Hanukkah because that's actually means you're dedicated. They dedicated the temple, right? So you hear even Solomon dedicating, that was a Hanukkah, right? There was a dedication that was being done. So when they rededicated the temple, when it came to the Israelites, that's the Hanukkah, right? It was just another event of dedication that was happening. And even as we train our children, it says, that scripture about train your child in the way, that's to dedicate your child in the way that he should go, so he'll never depart from it, right? So you got to get that understanding as well. Sometimes we got to understand the root words, and that's why it's important for us to know our, ancient Hebrew as well. All right, so next, I'm going to go through this pretty fast. So going back to the book of Daniel, you got Daniel had the vision. This is just a summary because I know some people don't understand. Some people just come into the beliefs of it, so I'm not going in detail. I usually do that at the feast days. But, Daniel had this dream about the head of gold, the breastplate, the breast of silver, the thighs of brass, the legs of Rome, the legs of iron, and, the future people say Antichrist kingdom of iron and clay mixed up, the revived Roman Empire. Some people say it's the UN, whatever. But just giving you an understanding. So during the time of Hanukkah, it was during the time of Greece. So that would be the time of brass. And you don't hear much people talk about that. And because there's not much of it in our Bible that talks about the time of Greece. You start during the time, especially when we're coming out of Egypt. Even before that, we're coming out of and other places, but you coming out of Egypt, and then after Egypt, you stay there for a while, and then they start getting taken all these different places. Northern tribe go to Assyria, and then the southern tribe go to Babylon. So that's where Daniel's at. And then after that, Persia comes about and defeats Babylon. So a lot of Daniel's in the eyes of Israelites, not in the eyes of just the history of what's going on in the region. It was in the eyes of the Israelites. So make sure you read it in the context of an Israelite, not of a historian. But then you also have Greece that came in, and Greece basically took over Persia, right? So you can see that during that time of Greece, where is that in the Bible? Because Malachi, they're still during the time of coming back from Babylon and stuff. And then when you get to the New Testament in Matthew, right, in the Brit Hadashah, they're under Rome. So there's like a skip between Persia and Rome. There's a big jump. There's a big jump in between, right? So it's like, where's Greece? So some people say you have to go to the book of Maccabees to understand, but I say that it's in the Bible also, but it's just not as dominant, as some of the other stories. So if we go to the next. So Hanukkah's in the Bible. So if you go to Daniel 8, you'll start seeing some of this, just so you know. People like Hanukkah's outside of the Bible. It's in the book of in the Apocrypha. It is in First Maccabees and Second Maccabees, but it's also in the Bible. So when people say, if it's not in the Bible, we can't do it, it's in the Bible. So Daniel 8, if you go to the next slide, it is also in Daniel 11. So a lot of times, Daniel's getting the same dream. He starts off with the statue, then it breaks out into animals, the different beasts, like I read at the very beginning of the service, and then it breaks out and he starts talking about the different kingdoms, right? He starts talking about the goat and the ram, right? He started breaking down this stuff. So Yah is breaking it down to him, right? To the interpretation of the angels. So it's basically building up what happened and now and also what's going to happen in the future. So next. So he starts off when he talks about in Daniel 11, he talks about how, this mighty king will arise with great authority and do as he please. And then he's going to pass. And then, his kingdom's going to be broken out and 4 other kingdoms. So during the time of Alexander the Great, that's exactly what happened. He came, he took over, he fought Persia, defeated them. And then after that, when he died, died of just natural causes, his kingdom was broken out. And, it was broken out more than just 4. There was a big war. There's a whole, if you go look at the history, it was a big war between a lot of different people, but it ended up being 4 major of his generals. And then they start fighting among each other. And that's when you hear about the king of the south and the king of the north. That's really the 2 on the left that you see with Seleucus and Ptolemy. They were the two fighting because Seleucus ended up beating, I think it was Seleucus that beat out these other two nations as well. So Daniel 11 is really like a step-by-step history, line of history, and a lot of secular Bible scholars, they'll try to say that Daniel he was writing past history because it's so accurate, when he was actually writing future history because he was so accurate to a point talking about the Syrian wars, right? So he goes step by step through the Syrian wars. If you look up what the Syrian wars is, you'll see all about it. But then, there is still some future prophecy in Daniel as well. So I'm not what they call those people that only believe that Daniel was all gone. I can't think of the word right now. I learned it in seminary. But, there was some preterists. They're called them preterists when they say that all of Daniel has been accomplished. I'm not saying that. There is some that was accomplished in our past, but there's still some, as we talked about with the Antichrist, or some people say anti-Messiah, however you want to call them, in the future. But this is the time of the Greeks, right? So Alexander dies, and then his thing was broken out to 4 generals, and then there's 2 generals that's left. All right, next. And then, that's the king of the south. That's what I'm talking about. Daniel 11 says, but after some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out peaceful arrangements. So that's when you start having these battles. As you see on the right, Seleucus takes over Lysimachus and Cassandra. So that's why you have the little orange dots in there, because he ends up taking over those kingdoms. And even Rome, ends up attacking, and that's where you get Hannibal, the black Carthage, general that, defeated Rome on their ground. So all this is during that period of time. So next. And you can see here that, I'm not going to read through all this, but this is where you see how they're trying to Hellenize the Israelites. And you see the Greek god, wine, Dionysus, Bacchus. So he was the god of ivy, right? So, AKA say, remember the ivy. And if you start looking at the daughters or the worshipers of Dionysus, they were women that actually, used to, tear apart men. And they have little staffs with, ivies or flowers, and you can see the AKA, they got flowers. He was the god of mask. They had the Bacchus frog. So, AKAs like frogs. Women used to dedicate rabbits to them. So, you hear AKAs say ski like a rabbit. So it's very interesting. And actually some of people try to say, secular people try to say Dionysus was basically the same as, was really Jesus, which we know it wasn't true. But people try to mix that up because it was like he was a virgin birth, because he was actually born of a woman. A Titan killed her, and Zeus took him as a child from his mom's womb and put him in his hip. And then he was born, like a virgin birth. So it's a lot of craziness is going on. But you can see there that they continue to try to have, women, dissolute dancing women, right? They had social impurity. They had festivals. They had, sexual things going on there. They had feasts to honor the barrel openings. You know how a lot of frats drink barrels of beer and, stuff. But he who drank the most was honored. The fifth festival of barrel opening was now celebrated in much the same way in Judea. So it start going into the Israelites, right? They start getting associated with these traditions, right? And it says they introduced singers, dancers, and dissolute women at these festivals. So we know that a lot of the frat parties got all kind of stuff going on, right? They got the barrel opening. So, and it even talks about how even that some of these were even called frats even back then. So, it's very interesting when you see how they were trying to impose their beliefs as what they were called Hellenes, not Greeks, on the Israelites. And that's the same thing that's happening in America now, is that we're getting influenced by the Greek customs that we don't even have anything to do with, right? But you can see that they maybe not in this part, but there's actually how they even had to give stuff to like make alms to the poor and stuff, right? They were doing a lot of civil stuff, even though they were still doing a lot of pagan, Greek, European paganism. So this is going to also go into y'all willing next week, because we're going to be talking about some of the holidays that we celebrate that are based on European paganism. So we can see how we were being influenced as we came as slaves to America, how we got influenced by the British, who actually were dominant in America, and how we were, basically forced to assimilate into American, European, British type of culture that actually was based on paganism and the mixing in of Catholicism, you know, of their religion with the Bible. So, but we'll get to that. So next, and that's where we're talking about the different frats and sororities. There's a good video. I think there's a brother from Truth Unedited. I think his name is Ron or something. He's going to a lot of stuff around frats and sororities now. It's great to look at that. And he even talks about the history and goes in a lot of detail. So it's very good to look at that and how, you know, we got, even now, how even Christian pastors even fight for this stuff when it's reason why Yah, I feel like, is cursing us. Because once again, we're worshiping false gods. All the frats are connected to false gods. If you know about what is it, Beta, whatever that one, the first one is, it's about the cat goddess. You can see the girl there, the fourth picture with blue with the cat. If you ever seen the movie of Catwoman, she starts worshiping Paset, and it's the same goddess that they worship, right? If you saw Black Panther, you see the Panther god. It's the same god that they are talking about, you know, all throughout. And if you see the third one with the deltas, they got Minerva, a goddess. Just Google Minerva at the top of their shield, right? So all these have a connection. Actually, they even have a quote. I got a pro-frat book where they talk about how each one of them are connected to what God and all. And this is a pro-frat book. You can just get from the library, anybody. So there's no mistaking. This is not no conspiracy theory, but they actually do teach that there is some connection to some of the Greek gods and some of the Egyptian gods that Yah told us not to go back to, right? So just want to make sure that point, because this is the reason why we're in the place, not just this, you know, it's masonry. There's just our own sin. Some of people listen to all kind of satanic music now, you know, even Kendrick Lamar, if you listen to how he even talks against the Messiah, or, you know, tries to mix in a lot of the, you know, sin along with the Bible, right? He talked about being the devil. So there's a lot of stuff that we get portrayed and we get sucked in. And then, you know, Yah's like, hey, here I am. You forgot about me, right? And that's when he gets mad. He says he's a jealous God, right? But he still loves us. So that's the reason why only a remnant is going to wake up. But, you know, because there's no pulling away some people from this stuff. So I even, you know, just don't even try to push it so hard, because I've told people and showed them firsthand, and some people say, I still don't care. So, and now the pastors and stuff are also, you know, becoming frat members now, you know, in their 50s and stuff. So it just shows you there's a stronghold on our community. So next. But that's the same thing that they were doing. But also on top of that, they were also introducing the Olympics and the gymnasiums, you know, about sports. And that was more from the Greek standpoint, because remember, they were warriors and they had to stay fit and stay ready to fight. And, you know, gymnasium means, you know, gym or gymnastic means, you know, to exercise naked. So they had to be naked, but remember, they're circumcised. So they had to do stuff to make themselves uncircumcised, you know, so they had to find ways to assimilate in the community because they were ashamed of who they were as Israelites. So I feel like that's the same way our community kind of, you know, bleached their skin and start wearing, you know, blonde hair and try to get blue contacts. There's a way that we're trying to be accepted by being assimilated within a culture that's not ours, right? Just to get, you know, some kind of social advancement, right? So they were doing the same thing back then. All right. So next. And we can see even in the Olympics today, they do this ceremony. I didn't even know about this, but they do this ceremony where they actually perform some kind of thing to some Greek goddess type of thing, and that's what starts the carrying of the torch throughout America. So, or the world, yeah, it goes through the world. So that's just like, I remember being young, running with that torch, being happy, and didn't know it had anything to do with some kind of Greek god. But you know, the Olympics was Zeus, so you know, or Jupiter even. But that's what it was. The dedication was to him, right? So that's important for Hanukkah, because later on, next, you know, they basically took that back then, Jupiter, and put it in the temple to defile the temple. So here we are celebrating stuff now that Yah's like, what are you doing? These are the things that were defiling me. And they took a pig and killed it on the altar, and that's in actual Daniel 11. It talks about, you know, how they desecrated the sanctuary. Right, so if you go through Daniel 11, it starts talking about what happened during Hanukkah even, right? So you can see how they set the abomination of desolation. So that's what the abomination of desolation, because they're basically polluting the temple. Next. And then you get these Daniel 11:35 says some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it's still it is still to come at the appointed time. So some of the Israelites were fighting, trying to, you know, fight for their people. Even though some of them actually failed, they won it first, but all the brothers end up getting killed or dying out, fighting for their people. So next. And then you can see in the book of Maccabees, it does talk a lot about Hanukkah. And even as they basically got back and won the temple, they beat the Seleucids, that Greek kingdom that we talked about, the king of the north. They basically defeated Seleucid and were able to claim back the temple. And then that's when they start putting the candlestick and re-putting the menorah and cleansing it out. And they start partying. They started getting candlestick, harps, lutes, cymbals. And they did it for 8 days, similar to what we do for Sukkot. And, that was a time of dedication. So we see in verse 56, and they kept the dedication, Hanukkah. That's that word Hanukkah, of the altar 8 days, right? And then they also decorated and did things, in form of similar to Sukkot, right? And when the temple was first dedicated by Solomon, it was during the time of Sukkot. So it's very interesting how, some of these holy days, memorials, I put it that way, were definitely connected. And they even fought against the Idumeans. So that's the Edomites. So that's what, Mr. Hashua was talking about in reference to the Edomites and stuff like that. And you hear a lot of things about Edomites, and most churches don't even talk about Edomites, where it's in Obadiah that in the last days they will come against the children of Israel. All right, so next, they always been coming. But we know that Yahushua was at the Feast of Dedication in John 10:22, and it talks about he was there. And he actually had a time, it says, walking in winter during the Feast of Dedication, that was Hanukkah. And he says, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. He has a Hanukkah sermon, I call it, where he talks about those who are truly dedicated to him versus those who are not. So he's calling people out, just like during the time of Maccabees and Hanukkah, those that were truly dedicated to Yah, they fought, right? They fought for their freedom to serve him, right? To worship him and to honor him, while other people assimilated into the culture. So here Yahushua is calling them out in the New Testament, or the Brit Hadashah. He says, my sheep know my voice. If you're not part of me, he's actually rebuking the Pharisees and the people like that. So, he says, only certain people know my voice and they follow me. So are you following his voice? Or are you doing what the worlds do? That's basically what it's all about. Hanukkah is your dedication. We're the temple. We're dedicated to him. All right. That's how we celebrate. That's the next. And that's what it means, in 2 Corinthians 6, it says, do not be bound together with unbelievers, for what partnerships have righteousness with the lawless, or what fellowship has light with darkness, or what harmony has the Messiah with Belial, or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever, or what agreement has the temple of Yah with idols, for we are the temple of the living Yah. Just as Yah said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and will be their Yah, and they shall be my people. Therefore come out from their midst and be separate, says Yah, and do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you. And I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says Yahuwah Almighty. So that's what, even in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, that's a calling out, right? That he's calling us out to live holy, to be righteous. But just like he said, it doesn't mean that we just become hermits and don't, that we've called out ourselves, but yet in the same way that he's basically telling us to live holy so we can be an example among others, so they can actually see the same light as well, like Yahushua did, right? He walked around tax collectors and prostitutes and all those people, and yet he still lived holy to be a beacon of light for those that have the lost sheep of Israel. All right, so next. So it's interesting because when you get into some of the historical books, this is the Oxford Bible Atlas, and you can see on the left, it talks about the time of Maccabees, right? So like, what is this? Why am I showing this, right? So it talks about the time of Hanukkah, and if you go to the next, if you zoom in, you see a place where it says Sena, right? So Senna is during the time of Maccabees that they're talking in the time of Judah. All right, so next. So Sena, like I said, this is the short version. So Sena is actually a tribe of people in Mozambique. They're called the Sena people. And it's important because they're called the Sena people because they're also in Zimbabwe and Mali and Mozambique, but they're connected to another group of people. It's the same group, so they just call them different in different regions. So next. We can see that during the time of Isaiah 14, this article talks about how these people were connected to the Israelites coming out of Babylon, and they were rejected because they were told to leave them, to be exiled, because they wouldn't give up their women that were not Israelites. They were Moabites, living among them, and they were basically lost to customs. So they told them, and they said they wouldn't. So these end up become, there was different regions also that John Hyrcanus, the Israelite, during the time of Hanukkah, during that time, I would say it was after Hanukkah, but during that time, he took over certain regions, and it says, but Josephus mentioned them in the history of Alexander, Janus, Heshbon, and Nadaba, Lemba, and Oronis. So Lemba is actually one of the territories was in that place during the time of, during that time of Maccabean Empire or during the time of Hanukkah. Like I said, I'm not going into a lot of detail here. So next, just overview. So the Lemba people are connected to the Sena people. They're the same people. So they both have a territory in Judea that had a city. Here you see in the middle, it was called Lemba. And the Lemba were the same people that we helped with as well, our passing of our elder Cohen Hamadichi. And you can see that, the certain tribe of them were tested by Duke University, and they knew that they had the highest percentage of the Cohenine, the priestly gene, probably in the world. They won't give them their DNA results. So this is in my DNA on the left. You can see the first tribe that they have, at least through this JED match, that a lot of African Americans, the first tribe they have connected to us are called the Lemba. And they're also in Congo, they're in Cameroon, they're all around, right? Because they kind of dispersed and went different migration paths. Some in Zimbabwe, South Africa, they're all around. And you can see here in North Carolina, Duke books, right? You can see genetic afterlives, I think that says Black Jewish indignity in South Africa. So that's by Duke University. And under that, you see UNC TV, the public PBS channel here locally, and they said the Lemba, the Black Jews of Southern Africa. And they have an article. I think this was maybe in the 90s or early 2000s. I don't see a date up there. But they've been known about this. So why don't we know about this actually living in North Carolina? So next. So this all connects back to Hanukkah. So it shows you that our people were there during the time of Hanukkah. And, why would this not be a festival for us? So there's a difference between Hanukkah and the Feast of Lights. So, even though they try to associate that, if you can see the difference between the two candles, one has 9 branches, one has 7. So we go more into the understanding of what that means when we actually celebrate Hanukkah. But that was an overview. All right. Give me a couple of minutes and I'm going to go through the next one.